Takadosh Boker or Masechet Bava Metzia Daf Amud Aleph 45a1. We were just speaking about the entire concept that according to Shitat Rabbi Yohanan, we were trying to bring the machlok between Rabbi Yochanan and Shakish to do the Mishnah Maaser Sheni. That according to Rabbi Yochanan, he says, "En mechalin, we're not going to be mechalel fruits on dinare zahav because according to Shitat Rabbi Yochanan, asur lilvod dinar bedinar, which means you're not allowed to lend out money of a dinar even though the guy already has a dinar. Why? Because of ribit d'Rabbanan. But it looks like ribit d'Rabbanan. What does it mean ribit d'Rabbanan? It means that it looks like that it's going to go up in price, right? Which means that if I lend you $1 and now the dollar goes up in value, so therefore that was just like ribit. Again, it's d'Rabbanan, obviously, because I didn't charge you interest. I'm charging you the same dollar that I lent you, but at the end of the day, since it went up in value, it's called ribit d'Rabbanan. So he says dinar demai. What type of a dinar is Rabbi Yochanan talking about? Ilema, if you're going to tell me now dinar shel kesef, dinar shel kesef, a dinar of silver with a dinar of silver. He says, can you tell me that it's not considered tiva, meaning that it's the same thing? It's the same. You remember that we spoke about what is considered fruit, what is considered a tiva, which means the produce or the actual essence in itself. Here, it's the same thing. So obviously, you cannot tell me that it's considered something else. Elapshita, but rather, we're talking about dinar shel zahav, dinar shel zahav. Okay, so we're talking about that it's a dinar of gold, and we already said that the dinar of gold is considered like a produce, like fruits, because usually it's not very tangible to actually use it. You can't really use it for something. Ulman, yeah. So the Gemara says, obviously, we're talking about dinar shel zahav, dinar shel zahav, and according to who? If you're going to tell me it's according to Shitat Bet Hillel, ha'amre tiva have. He said that it's going to be tiva, which means that there's no problem. You could do it. Elalav, rather, I have to be going to Bet Shammai. Ushmamina. So according to this, it comes out that Rabbi Yochanan is the one that says that we're not going to be michalelin perot even on dinar zahav, which is considered a fruit lechol davar. So therefore, that's what comes out. That means this is Shita Rabbi Yochanan. Says the Gemara, no, that's not the Shita Rabbi Yochanan. Really, I'm going to tell you that Rabbi Yochanan is the one that says mechalin. You are allowed to do it. That means you could come and you could put the. Remember, we're talking about Maseches Sheni. That, for example, I've got fruits. Now, what was the concept of the chilul? The concept is that I have to eat these fruits in Yerushalayim. Now, I'm living in Syria, right? And right, I'm living in Syria. Now, I'm not going to come and start taking my fruits every single 2 seconds. So what do? I mechalel otam. So therefore, what I come is I put the value of it on money. Now, the question is, can I put the value on any type of money or not? So here, that's what the pshat is of mechalelin. Now, remember, when you're putting the value on money, you have to add a fifth, right? Which means that the second that you put a value on it to a coin, you have to add a fifth. If you're going to take the same fruits, you don't have to add anything. You take the fruits, you take it to Yerushalayim, you eat them inside of Yerushalayim, that's it. But if you are actually going to come and you're going to put mechalel on money, you have to add a fifth. And then when you get to Yerushalayim, you come and you take all this money and you have to use it for different produce in Yerushalayim when you're there for Aliyah L'Regel. So you could buy your shawarma, right, and your lafas and all the other things that you buy over there. Yeah? One day it's pizza, the other day is sushi, the other day, what was it? Shawarma. Okay, whatever. Like all the...
You're going to eat, you don't need to set aside.
You don't need to add on a fifth if you're going to eat the same fruit there in Jerusalem. The adding is only if you're going to do pidyon, if you redeem it, if you're mechalel it.
So if you eat them outside of the Yerushalayim?
Yeah, but you have to be podeh. You have to.
למה הרב בבקשה?
Says the Gemara, really באמת, Rabbi Yochanan comes and he says, mechalelin. B'shani halva, a halva is different. Kevin delian mekach memkar shavin rabanan kipeira deamrinan ihu niu deokir vezin. Says in the mekach memkar it goes up and down. To do with the halva, right? Also, it's considered a fruit. And therefore, once it's going to be considered a fruit, so therefore you're not allowed to be malveh, dinar zahav, and dinar zahav, because it's halva'ah of se'ah b'se'ah, which means that you do have a problem of the ribit. Because if you remember, we said that if it's going to go up in value, now you could have a problem of ribit. Okay? Fine. Again, remember, there's no Rabbi Doraita here, but it's not that you're taking interest on a loan, right? It's just the Rabbanando because it looks like Rabbi. Because, for example, if I'm going to come and I'm going to lend you 1 kilo of strawberries, and all of a sudden tomorrow the prices of strawberries jump up, and now I give you back the kilo, and I'm not giving you the same fruit, obviously, because I ate that fruit. I'm giving you new fruit, so it looks like I just gave you Rabbi. Because beforehand you gave me something which was $5, and today I'm giving you 10. You're right. It's not Rabbi because I didn't ask you for the 10, but you're giving it to me like in food form. But it's the same thing. That's what we're saying, right? That's the concept of Se'ah b'Se'ah or Rabbi de Rabbanan over here. The Hachanami Mistabra, it's also logical to say this. The Chiata Ravin, because when Ravin came, he said the name of Yochanan, Afal Pisha Amru Chachamim, even though Chachamim come and they say, Asur livot dinar b'dinar, aval mechalin maaser sheni alav. That means you're not allowed to lend dinar for a dinar, but you are allowed to do chilul on it. And that's the concept of chilul, maaser sheni on it. And the Shema Mina. So therefore, we actually bring a proof from this, that it's Rabbi Yochanan, that it says you're allowed to be mechalel pelot maaser sheni on a dinar zahav, even according to Shitat Bet Shammai. Okay? Fine. Tashema. We're going to try to bring a proof now. Okay? And it says like this. Tashema aporet sela mima'aser mimaot ma'aser sheni. If you're going to come and you're going to be poret sela from money of ma'aser sheni, which means you have money, let's say, for example, copper, right, of ma'aser sheni, and now you want to change it to silver coins. You had copper coins, so let's say you had pennies, and now you're changing it to 25 cents, right, which is silver, right? Fine. So Bet Shammai come and they say, Bechol asela ma'ot, which means, right, you're allowed to come and change all the money in your hand to the seller to bring it up to Yerushalayim. Bet Hillel come, they say, you're not allowed to change everything, only half of it, right? Like the erech of a shekel. Then you change to kesef. And the rest of it, you're going to change it, right? You just leave it to with your hands in Nechoshet, and you bring it up to Jerusalem. Okay? You bring it up to Yerushalayim. So says now the Gemara, how do we know this? Meaning, are you allowed to change all the money? You're changing everything from the copper to the silver? Or do you do only half-half? Yeah? Interesting, yeah? So hashta, now, right, lebet Shammai, according to Bet Shammai, legabe prite michalelin, to do with prita, which is, remember, the prutot is always made out of nechoshet, right? The copper was the inferior one, so it's the prutot, right? Just like now, the pennies, copper, yeah? So he says, legabe da'ahava mibaye. So do you have a safek then to do with zahav? It's pashut misvara that if the nechoshet is considered money, right? Koshkan dineret zahav is considered money, and you could be mechalel on them. So answers the Gemara, it's not true. Well, it's not that morid, it's that you could change it over. So he's trying to say it's not true. Why? Shane prite be'atra de sagyan charife. The prutot, you could always use it. The da'ava, the zahav, you can't always use. So even though, again, it's got obviously a much higher value, that doesn't matter. Because you just can't use it. You understand? So that's what he says here. Shane prite, it's different, the prutot, Pe'atra de Sagyan Charife, because when they come out into the shuk and everything, right, it's even more than the regular matbeot, than the regular coins. Okay? Lishna Charina, another language. Amrila, they said, Rabbi Yochanan and Shakish, a machloket between Rabbi Yochanan and Shakish. Chadamar, one of them says, machloket is bislayin al dinarim. Can you be mechalel a sela on a dinar of zahav? The Bet Shammai come and they hold, V'tzarta ha-kesef biyadecha. So when it says v'tzarta kesef biyadecha, the kesef harishon velo kesef hasheni, meaning it's only the first money that you're mechalel, and not the second money you're mechalel, and therefore you can only be mechalel it on another coin. Meaning you could take it from one thing to like a fruit to a coin, but not from a coin to another coin. But Bet Hillel says no, ha kesef riba. When it says v'tzarta ha kesef, what is extra hay? So that extra hay is coming to teach you that even the second money you could also do the same thing. Aval perot, when we're talking about fruits, al dinarin divrei hakol according to everybody, mechalinan. The kati kesef rishonu, but it's still considered kesef rishon. That is going to be the first samura. The chadamar, and one of them says. Now again, we didn't even say who's who. We just said one said and one said. Again, it's a machloket Rabbi Yochanan and Shakish. We didn't say who's who. The chadamar and the other one says, af beperot al dinarim, even by fruits on dinarim, nami also is going to become a machloke between Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel. Okay, that according to Bet Shammai, right, it's considered a peira and you cannot be mechalel on it. Okay, so therefore, obviously, you cannot be mechalel on the fruits itself. So mandamar, according to the mandamar that says slaim al dinarim is going to be considered a machloket. If you already argued on slaim and dinarim, why don't you argue also on slaim to slaim? The same thing, right? Argue on slaim to slaim. So says the Gemara, if they're going to argue to do a slaim al slaim, havamina, I would have thought to say, hanamina bislaim al slaim, aval slaim al dinarim modulehu betilel bet Shammai. I would have thought to say it's only going to be on slaim al slaim that Bet Hillel they permit it, right? Why? Because they don't hold of this isur of kesef sheni, meaning that even though you already redeemed it once, you could redeem it a second time around. There's no problem because remember the extra hey of itzarta ha kesef adds in that I could redeem it again. But we're talking about from the same coin, so one coin to another coin, but the same currency, same value, same everything. Aval slaim al dinarim. But when we're talking about slaim to dinarim, I would have thought to say that Bet Hillel is going to be modul to Bet Shammai. That gold to do with silver is considered like the peira, not the tiva, and therefore, right? I don't even know how you translate that in English, by the way. The peira and the tiva. How do we ever? I don't even think we did translate it. We just said that one is like more of the fruits, and one of them was like actual what the produce. The produce. Yeah, tiva was produce, and the peira was the fruits. That's what we translated. Okay. Right? Okay. So he says the davar gabikavs ba'peira have and with lo mechalina. So Kamash Malan comes teach you the Tana that this is a machloket to do with slaim al dinare zahav in order to teach you that even Bet Hillel are going to permit this as well. Capish? Okay, fine. Tashema, another proof. Haporet sela shel maaser sheni b'Yerushalayim. If you're going to be poret a sela of maaser sheni in Yerushalayim, Bet Shammai omrim, Bet Shammai come and they say bechol sela maot. What does it mean bechol sela maot? Right, in the entire sela that you have in your hands, it's going to be nechoshet. Bet Hillel omrim, Bet Hillel says beshekel. Right, whether we're talking about you should always have a shekel kesef, a shekel maot. You should always leave half of it in the same currency, and half of it you could change to the silver. So this is what we said before about changing, meaning it's never good to have everything in one basket. So same thing, never have one currency. Imagine a person comes, they have only bitcoins. The Bitcoin goes down, they lose everything. So I have a little bit of this, a little bit of that. You know, never do everything in one. So Tashema, we're going to try to bring a proof then. Haporet sela al maaser sheni b'Yerushalayim. If you're going to be poret a sela of maaser sheni in Yerushalayim, Bet Shammai, when Bet Shammai come and they say b'chol sela maot. Right, when we're talking about the entire sela, we're talking about maot of nechoshet. Bet Hillel omrim, Bet Hillel come and they say b'shekel kesef. Shekel maot. We're talking about shekel kesef and shekel maot. Okay, so now it says like this: Hashta now kaspa legabe prite mechalina, and you just told me that you're allowed to do kesef on prutot of nechoshet, meaning you're allowed to come and you're allowed to mechalel coins of prutot, which is the copper, right, of silver onto the copper. We don't say kesef yishom lo kesef sheni. Legabe dava dechashmine, but now by gold. It's even more important. So, meaning like this. One more time. You have prutot. What is prutot made out of? Copper. Why? Because the prutot is like the pennies. Even nowadays, pruta, right, or the like the agurot, right? It's like the cents, right? So that was made out of copper, and the bigger one was made out of silver. And if they had even was made out of gold, right? Obviously, it goes up in the value. You understand? So therefore. He says, if right now you could come and you could switch silver onto the copper, so if the gold is superior to the silver, obviously you could switch to the gold. So Rava says it's not true. Yerushalayim kamotavta. He says what? Are you going to ask from Chilul Maaser Sheni Yerushalayim? Shani Yerushalayim, it's different Yerushalayim, but it's written over there. Once you're able to come and you're able to buy with any ma'achal ktanim and everything which you need, so therefore you could actually come and therefore the Torah is permitting you to do anything. Okay? Mashen can outside of Yerushalayim, it's not true. Meaning in Yerushalayim, you're right. You could do whatever you want. But not outside of Yerushalayim. So Tashema, we're going to try to bring a proof. Haporet sela mimaot maaser sheni. If you're going to be poret sela, right, for money of maaser sheni, and you want to switch it with kesef and bring it up to Yerushalayim, Bet Shammai come and they tell you bechola sela maot that he's allowed to come and do the entire sela. Ubet Hillel omnim, and Bet Hillel come and they say beshekel kesef, beshekel maot. Whether we're talking about a shekel, right, of kesef or a shekel of maot. So therefore, it comes out that you have to actually leave it over. So therefore, it comes out that according to Bet Shammai, they permit on Kesef Sheni, even outside of Yerushalayim, not only inside Yerushalayim, even outside Yerushalayim, you're permitted. So answers the Gemara, according to everybody, HaKesef, Kesef Riba, the word, the fact that it says HaKesef, that comes to include Vafilu BeKesef Sheni. And you remember, by Maaseh Sheni, there's an extra hey. V'tzarta HaKesef Biyadecha. So the extra hey is teaching you that even if you redeemed it once, you can redeem it again onto another coin. But if it's going to be that we came and we actually mentioned this, right? He comes and he says, what are we dealing with? He comes and he says, he says that it be Yochanan Reshakish. One of them says the machloket is Slaim and Dunyarim, that Bet Shammai hold Gazrina and that we make a Gezerah midrabanan that you shouldn't do it. Because of the Chasha, Shema Yaseh Aliyotav, right? Memhe Bet 45b. Shema Yaseh Aliyotav means that maybe you're not going to bring it up to Yerushalayim. Meaning, if I'm going to come and I'm going to bring it up to such a high coin, I'm not going to go to Jerusalem for a long time. Because imagine, I'm able to come and I'm able to do this for a little while. Because sometimes it happens that the money in the hand is not going to be paid with the value of the dinar zahav. So, if I didn't fill up the coin, I'm just going to continue going. It's like getting gas. As long as I still have gas, I'm not going to fill it up again. Why do you fill up the tank? Right? Unless you find out that something's coming or I don't know what, there's no reason to fill up the tank again. Same thing. I have a coin. If it's a higher value coin, for me to fill up this coin, it's going to take much longer. So therefore, that's the reason why he doesn't want you to do it. Because imagine, until you fill up this coin, it's going to take I don't know how long. So he says, Velo Masik, you're not going to go up to Jerusalem. Bet Hillel Savri, Bet Hillel hold. Lo Gazrina, we don't make this decree. Shema Yashel Yotav of Shema Yashel Yotav. Dechilo Malu Nami B'dinada. Because even if they're not going to come and they're not going to pay with the money that they have in their hands, a Suke Maseklu, for sure he's going to bring them up to Jerusalem. Aval Perot al Dinarim. But fruits, right? When we're talking about Chilul of the Perot on the Dinarim of Zahav, according to everybody, you're allowed to do it. They came in the Mirakve, but since the fruits, they go off. Lo Mashilu. Nobody's going to leave it. Meaning nobody's going to come and leave the fruits that way. You always want to come and eat the fruit right away, and you want to redeem it. Because fruits, after a little while, it goes bad. It spoils. The Chadamar, and one of them says, no, even by Perot and Dinarim, is also going to be a machloket, right, between them. Do we suspect also that you're going to wait until you're actually going to come and redeem it or not? So, Bishum alach lishna, I understand according to this Lashon, the Amarta that you said that the Midoraita, Shmisha Shari, the Midoraita, it's mutar, and the rabbis were the ones that made the decree. Hainu diktani, that's why we taught in the Mishnah, Ya'aseh velo Ya'aseh. Meaning you should do it or you shouldn't do it. But according to the Mishnah that says Midoraita, it's a machloket between them. Mechalim velo mechalim mibaile. Then the entire machloket should be, can you be mechalel or not? Meaning like this. If you tell me that the machloket is Midoraita, so then the question should be, can you be mechalel or not mechalel? Why? Because it's a din doraita. But if you're telling them that really be'emem Midoraita, for sure it's good. And it's only a gezerat drabbanan, so for I cannot use the terminology mechalim or mechalim, because midoraita you could be mechalel. So the only thing the terminology that you could use is, do you do it or not do it? Ya'aseh or lo ya'aseh? That's the question. So says the Gemara, you're right. Kasha. That's a good question. Meaning that's a question on the two lishonot of the first, the two first lishonot that we had. So here it's saying a kasha, right? It's not muchach that, we pushed it away, but for sure it's going to be a question because we should have actually said in the Mishnah, right? According to those shitot, mechalim velo mechalim. We didn't. We said yaseh velo yaseh, obviously. So it's mashma, it's only din drabanan and not a din doraita. Okay? Fine. Itma. It was stated. Rav and Levi. Rav and Levi. They both, one of them said, Chadamar, one of them says, matbea naaseh chalipin. You could use a matbea for kinyan chalipin. Right? So if you come and you gave a coin, right, and you did not, you give a coin. And what happens with this coin is that he says over here, you could use it for kinyan chalipin. So when it says natalo ma'ot and you didn't do meshicha, this is only if you gave him the money as a payment, not as a chalipin. Chalipin is that you do an exchange, because if you do an exchange, it's different. Okay? So he comes and he says, yeah, in such a case, the chadaman, one of them says, en matbea nasa chalipin. You cannot use a matbea as a chalipin. Okay? Chalipin usually was like what we do with the kinyan sudar and all that. It's like chalipin, right? That you switch. So for example, even though you never actually did meshicha to my item, but the fact that you came and you give you something else, that makes a switch automatically. So now it becomes yours. So even though the item, for example, is in my house. No, not for Shabbat. Chalipin usually we use it. No. So he says you can read it, but it's not yours until after Shabbat. That you could do. So he says over here like this. He says, Amar Rav Papa. Rav Papa comes and he says, what's the reasoning of the mandamar that says that the coin cannot become chalipin? Mishum dedate atzurata, because you want to know the tzura of it, which means the ikar chashivut of the matbea is the tzura of the matbea. The tzurata avida de batlan, it could be batel, which means that if it's going to be batel, there was nothing there. So how are you going to do chalipin on that? So he says, yeah, it's like right now, if you're going to come and you're going to take a coin and there's no form on the coin, you don't even know if it's an American quarter or if it's I don't know what. It's batel usually. It's not value anything. You understand? That's like a dollar bill. If you take a dollar bill and you tear it up, you know it's a dollar bill. But if you give it to the bank that way, they're not going to accept it. You have to tape it up or whatever it is. And even with that, but technically you can't just give it. But you see it's a dollar. It doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter. It has to have a tzura. If it does not have a tzura, it doesn't count. So he says, Tzran, and we also learned in the Mishnah, Hazahav konet kesef. We learned in the Mishnah that gold could buy silver. My lover, we're not talking about chalipin. Ushmamina, we're not talking about also the matbea nasa chalipin. But the matbea can do chalipin. So it's like, no, we're talking about damim. We're talking about money. Okay? Talking about the money. Fine. So it says the Gemara, if so, what does it mean then? Hazahav is konet kesef. What does that mean then? So he says, mechayev mi ba'eleh. You should have thought that zahav is mechayev the kesef, meaning it causes the money to come and to obligate kesef. But now that you're buying it, so you're right, Tani, you're right. This Tana actually learned in the Mishnah hazahav mechayev. It's also logical to say that, but since we said in the Sefer that the kesef is not going to be koned hazahav, so if you're going to tell me now, bidamim, we're talking about money, and that's why we said that the gold is going to be considered the peira and the kaspa is going to be considered tiva, and the tiva bepeira lokani. But if you're going to tell me b'chalipin, so then you could buy it. Meaning, once it's chalipin, I don't care which one's the peira and which one's the tiva. You could always do it. Chalipin always works. You have your cow in your house. I buy your cow. Now you have to do meshicha. I didn't do it. So what do? You give me your watch or whatever it is. Boom, we do chalipin. Now the cow's mine, even though I didn't do meshicha, because that's called chalipin. Chalipin means it's a switch. So for now, I acquire it. That means that even though I didn't actually do a physical acquisition on your cow, but that's how I do it. It's called chalipin. Ve'od Tanya, and we also learned in the Braita, HaKesef eno koneh zahav. Kesef is not going to be koneh zahav. Ketzad. What's the case? Machalo 25 dinar shel kesef dinar shel zahav. If you sold him 25 dinar kesef for one golden coin, which that's the valuation, right? Af al pi, even though shemashach the kesef, you did meshicha on the kesef, you didn't acquire until you do the meshicha on the zahav. So iyama bishama, I understand damim mishum hachi lokani, that you're not going to acquire the damim, the money. And iyama, but if you're going to tell me now we're talking about chalipin, why aren't you going to acquire it? Chalipin, you should acquire it. So says the Gemara, you're right. Elamai, what are we dealing with? We're dealing with damim, the money. Okay? And therefore we said that you're not going to acquire money that way. So for example, you gave me money and I gave you money. It was like a switch, but until we don't do the meshicha, it's nothing. If it was chalipin, then yes. But if it's just that I'm giving you money and you're giving me money, there's nothing until you actually both do the form of the acquisition. So Yachiv so ima reisha. Let's say the reisha. Hazahav konet kesef. How do we have that the gold buys the silver? What's the case? Machalo dinar shel zahav be-25 dinar shel kesef. If you gave him 1 dinar of zahav for 25 silver coins, once you did meshicha on the zahav, you're going to acquire the kesef b'chol makom shu. Now, if you're going to tell me now we're talking about chalipin, so that's why it makes sense that you're going to acquire it in b'chol makom shu. But if you're going to tell me now, right? But if you're going to tell me now, bedamim, we're talking about money. He says, no, the person should be obligated to pay. It's not that the money has nothing to do with money. So Ravashi comes and he says, "Leolam really be'emet." We're talking about damim, which is the money. Umay bechol makom shu. What does it mean that you acquire it any place where it is? Kemot shehu. Kemot shehu means the way that it is. Just like he told him, if he told him, I'm going to bring it to you from like a new coins. You can't bring it from an old one. Even though it's going to be better. Because it could be that the older ones are better than the ones, you can't. My Tama, what's the reasoning? Because he says, I want them that it should be by me a long time until they become yashan. And therefore, I prefer new coins that they're not going to come and to become old. Which means that, for example, if you're going to pay me something, you're going to give me $100 bill. You can give me the green one, or you can give me the blue one. I want the blue one. Why? Because if you give me the green one and I'm going to wait a long time with it, maybe it's going to become out of print, right? And by the way, that happened a lot of times. Sometimes the banks, they come and they check. I remember the euros, I think even. The euros became new, the pounds, even Canadian dollars. Canadian dollars also used to be like a paper, and then it became like more like a plastic type of, I don't know what. It was like very interesting. Like they changed. So then if you have the old ones, many times they stop accepting it. So if I want to keep something by
give you less.
On the green one.
Not less. What?
Which means that since the guy wants to keep it in his house for a long time, he's not going to get the old bills because he wants to keep it for a long time. So he's going to get the newest one. Because by keeping the newest one, that might become old, but the old one might become extinct. You understand? And then what do you do? What's it worth? It's worthless. They do that even nowadays with coins. They changed, I think, the coins also of pounds, of euros. Like they changed a whole bunch of things, and also the same thing. Yeah. So Amar Rav Papa says, even according to the mandamar, en matbea naaseh chalipin, that the matbea cannot be considered now into chalipin. Mevad hu de la vid chalipin. He says you cannot make a kinyan chalipin to purchase something else. But you could acquire it through chalipin, which means they themselves can become chalipin. They have a peida, just like fruits, according to Rav Nachman. Peida, why? He says, according to Rav Nachman, now, even though you cannot make chalipin with them, he says you could still acquire it through chalipin, which means even though they themselves are not acquired with kinyan chalipin, you could use them as a kinyan chalipin. So he says, Tiva nami lo shna. So to the same thing, there's no difference over here. Okay? Fine, we're just going to finish with the question. The question comes and it asks, Meitvei hayaomed bagoren. If you were in the Goren, and you don't have any money, you could come, you could tell your friend, these maaser sheni money, the fruits, they're given to you as a present. And then afterwards he says, it's going to be bechulal on the money which I'm going to have in my house, and then we're going to bring down the reasoning why, yes or not.